Mandy with Tidy Sticky Mama here, and you are not going to be seeing a whole lot of me at this video. So what we're going to be doing is showing you how to fold things KonMari style. Now why you would want to do that is basically two reasons. One, you can fit more in a drawer, and two, it's aesthetically pleasing. If you're doing the KonMari method in its entirety, it's a natural result to you having tidied up, but it's also useful if you're not going to do the whole process. I'm going to get started with something fairly basic that I think most of us have. And the whole idea here really is we're just making rectangles. You fold one side in and the other side, tucking in the sleeves if you need to. You've got this nice rectangular shape, and you're going to bring bottom to top. Another smaller rectangle, and then fold into thirds. Now folding into thirds gives it enough structure to stand on its own, which is the goal with KonMari folding. And we're going to go ahead and do this again on a larger t-shirt to show that it is still very much the same, even if it's shaped a little bit differently. This one is actually going to be even easier because it's more of a box shape. So you're still folding the sides into the middle, lining the sleeve up when it's too large, bring it back over, and tuck that sleeve in. Now you'll see I don't fold all the way edge to edge. That extra little bit of a lip helps with making sure that it folds nicely without anything weird sticking out. Now these can get a little bit tricky just because of how the shoulder part of the top is. But you can see without that, it's still basically a rectangular garment. So all I do is I fold that top right down and have it tucked inside. And then you see same thing, edges into the middle, then there's no sleeves. And then you just begin folding it over. Now this is folded in more than thirds because it's a little bit floppier. There's less fabric and less structure to this than there is a t-shirt. So there's 1, 2, 3 times I fold it over. And it's still a little bit floppy, but it holds. This is another way that I'll fold my camis because sometimes it just stands better when you fold it in halves rather than multiple folds. Now something a little trickier. I've got this shirt that I adore that has kind of these bat wing sleeves to it. And you can see it's not quite a rectangle anymore like the cami or the t-shirt is. So what I need to do is make it a rectangle by folding those sleeves in. And still fold to the middle. Now I'm not going to be too concerned about smoothing this particular shirt out because it's supposed to be a little slouchy and wrinkly anyway, but generally you do want to give it a nice smooth with your hands before you continue folding. The softer and silkier and slinkier the fabric, the more difficult it's going to be to get it to fold up. When the fabric itself lacks that nice crisp structure, you need to instill that structure via your folding in order to get it to stand nicely. You'll see here, I'll try folding it just like the t-shirt for the most part. Stand it up and it falls right down. So like I said, we need to get some more structure in there, and more structure usually means more folds. We'll fold it in one additional time in order to give it that little extra boost that it needs. Still bottom to top, and I'm still going to fold it into thirds. Now the package is a little smaller, but there you go, stands right up. The button cardigan isn't that far off from a t-shirt. The only additional challenge is the long sleeves and the buttons themselves. The first step to make that easy is to button it up. That closes your front and gives you a solid piece of fabric. You're still going to want to spread it out and then fold those sleeves in. You can kind of follow the seam for the sleeve and fold it in at an angle and then back along the side. It'd be a little bit tricky getting it lined up just right, and it'll vary some from garment to garment. But as you can see, the rest of the process is still very much the same. You're still aiming for a rectangle. Now it's a little more bulky than a t-shirt, so I'm going to actually fold it a little bit differently. Again, like you saw with the Cami, different garments will require different folds to account for their particular structure. Open front cardigan is really kind of a pain in the butt because there's no buttons for you to make the front of it a solid piece of fabric. So those I fold a little differently in that I fold them face up. This particular open front cardigan is also asymmetrical, so the end of it is going to be a little bit wonky, but it's not too much trouble as long as you remember what you're doing and aiming for a rectangle. What I'm doing here is folding in those edges. Now you can see I'm not quite satisfied, so I'm going to try again. Remember I said about that asymmetrical hem? I need to fold the bottom of the cardigan in further than I fold the top, so that I get a nice symmetrical rectangle at the end. And you may find you have to do that with a few different garments. But in the end, you'd never know. Still a nice, tidy rectangular package when we're finished. The long-sleeved button-down is a similar challenge to the button-down cardigan, in that you have those buttons to deal with. Presents the additional challenge of that collar, because you want to make sure that you fold it in such a way that the collar is protected. Now again, fasten your buttons so that you have a nice solid piece of fabric to start with. I'll straighten out the collar more once I've actually turned the shirt over. I prefer to fold these with the collar popped up. I feel like it does a better job of making sure that we don't get any weird angles on it once we're wearing it. Now you'll see I put an additional fold in this shirt because this particular button down is kind of a slinky fabric like that blue blouse earlier, so it needs me to add some extra structure to it. Now we're going to shift gears here a little bit and do some bulkier items, starting with the pullover knit sweater. Now, the basic concept is still very much the same. You're aiming for rectangles, but because it is so much larger and bulkier, it's not going to fold down as small, and you'll see as we go here. Now, because it is so much bulkier, the thing I said earlier about not folding the edges to quite meet is important because it cuts down on some of the bulk that you have at the edges, and that's going to give you a cleaner fold. Now bottom to top and then into thirds ends up being way too much bulk, and you'll see even semi-rolling this one, folding it in 2/4 from the get-go is too much. So bottom to top and then straight in half often works best for these sorts of sweaters. The pullover hooded sweatshirt or the zip front is still very much the same. The zip front sweatshirts, you're still just going to have to zip it up to give yourself a solid front. The tricky part with these is that hood. Now the process is generally still the same. You're aiming for rectangles. So after you tuck the sleeves in, instead of folding the edges over, you're going to fold in the hood. Now your goal is to flatten it out so that it lies nicely, and that's going to vary a little bit sweatshirt to sweatshirt. But then once that's done, you still fold your edges over, make your long rectangle, and these I usually fold directly into thirds simply because they are so bulky, especially after the additional bulk of the hood. Once again, we're going to switch gears a little bit and move on to bottoms. Now, I find that bottoms are generally easier than tops because they're already basically rectangles. Just for fun though, I'm going to start by folding something tricky that Marie herself actually advises you hang. but just in case you would like to fold a skirt, this is generally how I go about doing it. This one is hard because it is both very flowy and slinky, and it's got an asymmetrical hem. But again, all you're really doing in this process is trying to make a rectangle. And as long as you can fold the edges in and give your item structure, it'll work out just fine. And you can see here, despite those challenges, I have a nice rectangle to start with already. And it's just about folding it up so that it stands now. And the first try fails. And you'll find that even when you're experienced at folding your things, you might have to refold something if your first attempt isn't quite the way that you want it. Like I said before, bottoms are fairly easy because they're already pretty much rectangles. The only tricky part with pants in particular tends to be the crotch area where you have that little fold of fabric that kind of sticks out, but it's not too hard. You just sort of tuck it in as you go. As with anything else, there's more than one way to fold them. And you can see it doesn't stand up very well the way I got it before, so I need to make some small adjustments. Now, my particular drawers that my pants live in are shallower than that, so I need to fold it additional times for it to fit my space. It still stands up and it fits very nicely in my drawer this way. Shorts are very much the same story, just smaller. You'll see I'm folding a pair of jean shorts here because that's all I personally own. But if you're folding athletic shorts, you may find that it needs a few more folds to get the structure that it needs, just like we talked about with shirts that are a little more flimsy. And again, leggings are one of those things that's same thing again. It's pretty much already a rectangle and you're just making it smaller. You still are going to need to fold in the crotch area, and some people prefer to pretty much fold it to the size of the ankle part. And that works out just fine because you do need additional folds to make them stand out properly. You can also at this point roll it up like a sushi roll if you prefer, and then stand it on the end. I don't find that fits well in my space, so I don't. Now I know it seems utterly ridiculous to actually fold a pair of socks, but watch how much neater this looks. It makes me feel like a real adult to have my socks folded. If you have ankle-length socks rather than taller socks, you really just have to fold it in half, and it still looks very nice. Alright guys, well that's it for this one. Hopefully you found something useful, whether you're just starting your KonMari journey or you just want to see how to fit more stuff in your drawers. Keep an eye out for more KonMari videos. I'm going to do another one where I fold baby and children's clothes since they have some different things and sometimes that can get kind of tricky. So keep an eye out for that. Hit the like if you enjoyed this and hit that subscribe button so you can see the others when they come out. Thanks guys. Have fun. Watch me just utterly fail at folding this pair of shorts right here. To be fair, it's hard to get things to stand up nicely on a bed, which is the only open surface I really had to do this on, but still, just, this was so bad. And a good for nothing assistant cat of mine just did not help at all. Not at all.